How is it possible that I'm smart enough to know what I need to do, and still choose the very thing that destroys my own momentum? That is the paradox that has shaped most of my adult life. It isn't laziness. It isn't lack of motivation. It's something far more intimate, an invisible loyalty to an older version of myself who fears change more than failure. Every time I opened my laptop to work, I felt the same magnetic pull toward distraction. A tiny hit of dopamine from checking my messages, a mindless scroll, some digital micro-escape that stole my attention before I even realized I had surrendered it. My mind wasn't fighting for focus, it was fighting for comfort. And comfort always won. But here's the quiet truth I never wanted to admit. Procrastination isn't the opposite of discipline. It is the opposite of learning who I truly am. When I delay action, I delay identity. I delay becoming. And then I wondered, what would happen if I looked at procrastination the way Nietzsche looked at human potential? What if I treated focus the way William James treated habit? Not as something I wait for, but something I build brick by brick, action by action, breath by breath. Nietzsche would ask me why I betrayed my own possibilities. James would ask me why I expected motivation before movement. Two thinkers, two radically different psychologies, one shared belief. I am not stuck. I am simply untrained. This video is not about productivity. It's about reclaiming the self you keep delaying. It's about learning how to move even when your mind whispers you shouldn't. It's about no longer postponing the version of you who could have already been alive by now. And if you're ready, if you feel the tension between who you are and who you know you could become, then stay with me, because the hardest truth is next, and it's the one you've been avoiding. If any part of this feels familiar, I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful you're someone who reflects instead of running. If the ideas so far resonate, comment, I understand, so I know I'm not walking this path alone. And if you feel called, you're welcome to subscribe. It genuinely helps this work reach others who need it. I used to believe procrastination was a minor flaw, a small personal inconvenience, nothing more than poor time management sprinkled with occasional guilt. But I was wrong. Procrastination was not about work. It was about identity erosion. It wasn't the tasks I postponed. It was myself. The moment that changed everything happened during an ordinary morning. The kind where nothing dramatic is supposed to occur. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee cooling beside my keyboard. My project deadline was hours away, but instead of beginning, I drifted. Email, messages, scrolling, anything to avoid the confrontation with my own potential. I kept thinking, I'll start soon. I just need a moment. But that moment turned into an hour. And when I finally looked up, I felt it. A quiet, sinking disappointment, as if I had betrayed someone who trusted me. That someone was me. The room felt heavier than before, the silence sharper. I wasn't avoiding the work. I was avoiding the weight of becoming someone capable. I realized that every act of procrastination was a silent vote for remaining the same. I had turned my life into a museum of postponed intentions. In that hour, something inside me cracked open. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough for me to see that procrastination was a psychological exile. I was exiling myself from the life I wanted, from the strength I pretended I didn't have, from the courage I insisted wasn't ready. Nietzsche would have called this a refusal of my own becoming, a soft rebellion against the higher version of myself. William James would have called it the tragic misunderstanding that motivation precedes action. Both would have been right. That morning I felt the truth. I wasn't suffering from laziness. I was suffering from the fear of being fully awake. And as I sat there staring at the untouched project, I whispered the question that would follow me into the next chapter of my life. If I don't act now, who exactly am I becoming? I used to think procrastination was a failure of discipline, But the truth was quieter and more biological. My mind had become a labyrinth of tiny dopamine traps, little illuminated exits that promised relief from effort. I didn't realize how effortlessly I walked toward them until one afternoon, when I opened my phone just for a second before starting an important task. That second became 20 minutes. The minutes became a blur. And when I resurfaced, it felt like waking from a dream I didn't consent to have. I remember staring at the screen, realizing I wasn't choosing distraction. Distraction was choosing me. My brain had been conditioned, reward by reward, micro-release by micro-release, to fear silence, to fear depth, to fear the kind of focused attention that doesn't give me quick pleasure but does give me long-term meaning. It was in that moment that I understood something painful. My relationship with effort had been hijacked. The labyrinth wasn't external. It was inside me, shaped by every moment I picked comfort over creation. And the worst part was how predictable my behavior had become. The impulse to check my phone had turned into a reflex. The reflex turned into a pattern. The pattern turned into identity. Nietzsche would have called this the machinery of the last human, the one who seeks the warmest, softest, most comfortable corner of existence and calls it peace. William James would have seen it as the culmination of repeated unconscious habits carving grooves into my nervous system. Both would have looked at me with a kind of compassionate sternness. Nietzsche, because I was refusing the challenge of my own potential. James, because I misunderstood the true source of change. I thought dopamine was the enemy, but the real enemy was my passivity. So I began watching myself the way a scientist observes an animal, curious, honest, brutally patient. I noticed how quickly I reached for distraction the moment a task demanded emotional friction. I noticed how the first 5 minutes of effort felt like lifting a mountain, but the 6th minute felt lighter. I noticed how urgency could silence fear and how avoidance amplified it. And somewhere in that observation, I found an uncomfortable truth. The labyrinth was never designed to trap me. It was designed to test me. My attention wasn't broken, it was untrained. And as the realization sank in, I felt something shift. Small, subtle, but undeniable. The door out of the labyrinth had always been the same. Begin before my brain believes it can. Nietzsche entered my life not through a book, but through a moment of emotional collapse. I was sitting at my desk late at night, surrounded by unfinished work, unfinished plans, unfinished versions of myself. I felt split between the person I pretended to be and the person I feared I truly was. That fracture softened me, and in that softness Nietzsche's voice rose inside me, sharp, poetic, and unavoidable. He didn't ask, "Why are you procrastinating?" He asked, "Why do you flee from your own becoming?" His challenge hit me like a blade. I realized procrastination wasn't about time. It was about courage. Every task I avoided was a confrontation with a future self I didn't yet know how to inhabit. I feared the responsibility that came with possibility. I feared the weight of my own capacity. Nietzsche forces you to see the truth you spend your life dodging. The self you avoid becomes the fate you live. He spoke to the part of me that waited for a perfect emotional state before beginning, the part that romanticized future change instead of earning it through daily struggle. He showed me that every postponement was a betrayal, not of productivity, but of my will to shape myself. The brutality of his philosophy didn't crush me. It clarified me. He demanded that I stop negotiating with my smaller self, the one who seeks the path of least resistance, the one who confuses comfort with safety. Nietzsche wanted me to meet the version of me I could become if I stopped stepping backward every time life asked me to step forward. And in that confrontation, I felt something awaken, a fierce, trembling responsibility, a desire not to feel ready, not to feel motivated, but to feel honest. Honest about the days I hid, honest about the potential I let rot, honest about the courage I kept postponing. Nietzsche didn't tell me to stop procrastinating. He told me to stop shrinking. He didn't tell me to manage my time. He told me to reclaim my will. That night, for the first time in years, I closed my laptop. Not out of avoidance, but out of respect. I needed to sit with the truth I had been fleeing. The life I want requires the death of who I've been. If Nietzsche challenged me to rise, James showed me how. Where Nietzsche confronted my soul, William James stabilized my mind. His psychology didn't demand grand gestures. It asked for microscopic bravery. He believed that action precedes emotion, that the body leads and the mind adapts. And I needed that. I needed something gentle, structured, human. James taught me that habits weren't shackles. They were proof that identity could be engineered. I began experimenting with myself the way he might, with small, repeatable actions that bypassed motivation entirely. Instead of forcing myself to feel inspired, I simply acted as if I were someone who already followed through. At first it felt fake, mechanical, almost dishonest. But James said that imitation was the birthplace of authenticity. He recommended 3 rules without ever saying them directly. Start small. Start now. Start again. I did. I reduced every task to an embarrassingly tiny unit. Opening the document, writing 1 sentence, cleaning 1 corner of the room, and in the simplicity of these micro-actions, something shifted. My resistance weakened, the friction softened. James's remedy was not intensity, it was consistency. He believed the self was not discovered, it was practiced, and every repeated behavior pushed me closer to the version of me I was trying to become. I started to understand that the problem was never procrastination. It was my reliance on emotion to dictate action. James freed me from that. He showed me that discipline is less about strength and more about structure. Less about feeling capable and more about creating systems that make capability unavoidable. He gave me the psychological footing Nietzsche never intended to offer. And slowly, the identity I thought I lacked began to form. 1 tiny, repeated action at a time. The final shift happened quietly, not during a dramatic revelation, not during a crisis, but on an ordinary morning. I woke up, sat at my desk, and for the first time in a long time I didn't hesitate. I didn't bargain with myself. I didn't reach for my phone. I simply began. And in that moment I understood something both terrifying and liberating. I had become someone who does the work. Not because I suddenly possessed more willpower, but because I had stopped waiting to feel ready. The tension between Nietzsche's fire and James's method had reshaped me. One demanded greatness, the other taught me how to approach it 1 breath at a time. I realized that destroying procrastination wasn't about hacking motivation or controlling dopamine. It was about identity. Every action I repeated became a whisper to myself. I am the kind of person who moves. And over time, those whispers grew louder than my fears, louder than my excuses, louder than the old self begging to stay unchanged. Becoming the one who does didn't mean becoming perfect. It meant becoming willing. Willing to begin when I felt resistance. Willing to stay when distractions called. Willing to rise when the smaller self begged me to fold. It was in these small moments that discipline stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like alignment. I began to see that follow-through wasn't an achievement. It was a lifestyle, a lived philosophy, a daily remembrance of who I refused to stop becoming. And somewhere in that steady rhythm, I saw the truth. Procrastination dies when I stop negotiating with my destiny. Thank you for walking through these ideas with me, through the tension between who we were and who we're still becoming. If this journey helped you see yourself more clearly, I'm grateful you stayed until the end. If you'd like more reflections like this, more of Nietzsche's intensity, more of William James's grounded clarity, you're welcome to subscribe or share your thoughts below. Your presence here matters more than you think.